4 year of studies. And well, my academic interests and topics of investigation are mainly focused on international trade, also global market, sustainability, and business development, and well, especially in economic and sustainability. And well, I'm very glad to be here, and I'm here to support the session of today. And so I think this will be a great opportunity for all of us here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambar. Nice to meet you.
Well, Rodica, Amber, projection the student from your to university, why not? In postgraduate, yes. In August, Claudia visit your university. We have many students, so the student, leader student can apply and project postgraduate study in Bucharest University, thinking to connect San Mario University and Bucharest University. Yes, I read the proposal the Professor Lilian. I work this proposal to promote the contacts within our university. We have time to develop these activities.
Yeah, that sounds great. Of course, I will be happy to respond to questions and to further work on this. Yes.
Well, Rodica, Ámbar, brevemente puedes presentar a la profesora Rodica.
Yes, of course. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker for all of us. Is Professor Rodica. And well, she is an applied microeconomist and whose research focuses on data analysis and behavior analysis to improve personal and social well-being. And she studies attitudes, decisions, and behaviors related to sustainability, consumption, health, and financial decision making, social norms, and collective governance. And well, she teaches behavior and experimental economics, game theory, and health and environment economics at the University of Bucharest within the Department of Applied Economics and Quantitative Analysis.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hector and Ambar. Yes.
Well, amigos, amigas, please, Rodica, can you send me one paper for the assistant student to continue the course, no? Okay, yes.
Presentation?
Yes, okay. Yes, well, amigos y amigas, el material se les hará presente y es un gusto continuar actividades con Bucarest. Estamos con la profesora Rodica Yanole Kalim, la Facultad de Administración de la Universidad de Bucarest, y es un curso de 4 sesiones durante el mes de enero, esperando que sea todo un éxito, destacando el apoyo de Ámbar en este curso. Podemos empezar, Rodica. We can start, please.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for the invitation. I think it's a great opportunity for me to share this class with you. Indeed, I do teach a full year class in behavioral economics, and this behavior change strategy is part of my class, which is a master class. But I think it's also the most intriguing part. And I'm sure that we have various backgrounds here. And I expect comments on how you believe this type of models about what is the best approach when we want to really obtain change is relevant. Indeed, we're going to have these 4 sessions. And the objectives are following the main purpose of the class, which is first to be aware that there are new tools for behavior change strategies that are embedded in economics and in organizations, that they are not exclusive. So basically they work with stuff that we already know, but they do have some particularities, and this is important. Sorry, Ambar, do you want to translate that point? So should I stop, or I just go, and if people have questions, they ask me? Not sure.
Oh, okay. Yes. Well, for everyone, if you have any question or any doubt about the topic that we are talking about, you can write it on the chat, and I'm going to say it on the season to the professor to explain it or to answer the question that you have during the season.
Okay. No, that is great. Thanks a lot. Okay, so yeah, back to the objective. This is the idea, just to see what tools are out there. And then, because these type of tools, they are quite interesting and popular, but they are not always as simple as they look. So in that sense, we're going to try to see what are the mechanisms that make them efficient, right? So this type of key features to actually have good nudges and not just some type of marketing stunts. And then an area that it is usually quite heavy with comments and discussions is how we move from things that have been tested into the lab and how we move into the real world. So basically how we make this feasible in terms of practical implementations. And then of course, how do we take into account various ethical things that may appear? So these are, stuff that we will try to address until the end of the module. So if I would simplify it a lot, we're going to discuss about this idea of nudges, basically how they fit into what we know, what are their types, and then a quite new area of things that have developed from them, like boosts, sludges, and other concepts that may sound strange, but they have a quite clear meaning. We're going to do this by looking at the experiments through which they were tested. Some of them are in the shape of games, like experimental games. Some of them are just research design that have been validated enough, and that we believe that they are indeed presenting robust evidence. And from these, smaller interventions, we're going to go and try to put them into bigger frameworks, into models of behavior change that are looking systematically at the factors that are indeed shaping our behavior. And we're going to see what type of areas can we tackle. Of course, that in many cases, there are economic applications, business applications on, how to make things more fluid in consumption. But that goes also the other way around, how to protect consumers from maybe approaches of the companies that are not always great. So then we move into public policy applications, and then in between them, how these are applied in sectors that haven't been usually tackled with this type of tools, like education or public health and other areas. So just to start a bit, because the number of participants is high, so I'm not sure how much we could interact. But because this is a class on behavior change, I would like to ask you to think, or maybe you've already thought when you've seen the name of the class, one behavior that you would like to change. Usually it's easier if we try to change it in other people, so let's say that I want my students to read more, maybe, or maybe a behavior that is relevant for yourself, maybe you want to to do things differently. So maybe you can write in the chat, or you can take the word if you want. I do get basic Spanish, so if you can also say it in Spanish. If I don't understand it, I will tell you, but just un comportamiento que usted quería cambiar. Procrastination, clearly. Okay, to listen more than to speak. Yes. This doesn't.
Maybe punctuality also.
Punctuality. Okay. Impulsive reaction. Okay. So this is the first, so when we say reaction, what do you do after you have the reaction? Do you buy stuff? Do you get upset? So what's next? But yeah, absolutely. Yes, to lose fear when public speaking. That is absolutely a great one. Demotivation. Yes, we get this a lot, both students and teachers. Okay, so from these examples, I do get a sense of what may be relevant in terms of maybe potential examples, even if not all of them for this time, maybe for next time. Yes, yeah, motivation and apathy. And in general, what is interesting and what we're going to delve into is that these are behaviors that are somehow, like big umbrellas, right? So what be not having enough motivation or being apathic means? It means that, maybe we do not pay attention to something specific, and this becomes a more concrete instance of the behavior, or that maybe we are simply, not being punctual, as your colleague was saying, or we are not replying specifically, or many things that could actually go under the same area. So when we're going to see experiments and when we're going to see frames of behavior change, we're going to observe from the start that identifying as clear as possible what we want to change is a key aspect, so that we can actually obtain that particular change, right? So clearly, maybe all of us, we do not want to procrastinate, but what does it mean, to reply faster to emails, to work more, to do things in various areas. And when they become specific, we increase the realism of actually obtaining change. Absolutely, healthcare is an area that comes with a lot of challenges, because in many situations, patients just want a quick solution, with treatment, and not something that would actually imply a change on their behavior. Exactly how it is written here, because we tend to keep our habits, right? And there are various biases. We're going to touch on some of them, on why we want to maintain the status quo. And because, of course, changing in general comes with some type of discomfort. It is uncertain. We do not like it. For patients, clearly, it can come with bigger discomforts, right, depending on what you do. This is, in general, something that is very human, very understandable. It applies to all of us. But then, of course, it also reaches a higher level of tension when we feel bad, but we know what we should do to feel better, but we cannot indeed push ourselves into that direction. If there is no awareness about what we should change, then we don't feel actually that bad. We are probably upset, about the situation, but we do not know in what direction to go. But when we know, if I would exercise more, if I would be more careful on how I speak or how I write, maybe I would get in a different position and so on. But I'm not able to do this because I have habits and, a lack of change and so on. So in many cases, there are what we're going to discuss, this type of, traditional approaches, through which we hope we're going to convince others to do this. And it doesn't mean that they are not efficient, but it means that they usually treat things a bit superficial without going at this deeper levels of why, it's actually so hard to change. Because in many cases, it's not a matter of bad intentions, but a matter of not being able to follow a clearer path on this. So thank you for your answers. I've taken note, and hopefully I'm going to come back with some clearer examples for this area of interest. Now I will like to go through this traditional versus non-traditional case of interventions from a very, very simple example. As I said, it's always easier when we consider what we want to change in others, because we get more objective, let's say more critical when we observe other people. And this means also to consider when organizations, either public or private, want to achieve a certain change in their target groups. So, for instance, this is a case that would follow under the area of public health, right, where this ministry would like to determine the population to consume less sugar. Right, so we all know that there is clear evidence from the medical area, from public health, that this is associated with various types of diseases. So it would be nice if people would consume less sugar in general. So if you would be, counselor of the ministry, so what would you suggest to the ministry to do? So you agree this is a good objective. How to convince people or how to make people to consume less sugar? What can we do, generically speaking? What do you say?
Maybe promoting a campaign to the cons of eating sugar.
Okay, great. So a campaign about, what could be bad if we eat too much sugar. So this is a strategy that says, let's put more information out there. We maybe know that it's not good, but it's not clear how bad it is, right? So what is it happening? What is the quantity that is bad, and exactly, how to explain this in a simpler approach, right? So this is great information. Yeah, starting with kids in school and educating them. Of course, that where do you put the information is always an important case, because if you start earlier, then there are higher chances of this to be efficient. In some cases, we can, in other not. Then another one, and I'm not sure if Diego maybe is an economist, it says limiting access to sugar. So I'm not going to give you that much sugar. A very good strategy, right? If there is not out there, then I will find, as we say, economist substitutes, right? Yeah, and of course that the measure is good because it says, yes, where do I limit? I limit it in public schools, for instance, in the canteen. So it's not that I'm banning it completely, but in places where kids are more susceptible, I want to see this. Yes, information about benefits and costs. Identifying habits in groups and educate accordingly. So this is more about so this is another level than information, the one with habits, because it tells me that maybe people already have the information, but they're not using it correctly. So then I want to see their when they go for a coffee break and they smoke and they eat something sweet, if they're not kids but adults, or inside the house, outside the house, when they're alone, when they are with friends. So this means that it's more than information. It's about the social network. So if there is something that we do socially or alone, right? So then it is really important. Yes, we have this comment here that the information is not enough to change. And yeah, this is something that we're going to discuss. And of course, that we never know where is the limit, because of course, no information is also not good. Too much information, or information that is very hard to grasp. If you give me now a paper that is super medical and says something about what sugar does to my arteries or my blood, but I don't really understand it, yeah, I may tend to ignore it. So some amount of information is relevant, but indeed we see that it may not necessarily be always the trigger. Niria says changing the environment. Yeah, so this is again another great strategy, from a different category. So I can limit access, or simply change how I arrange things, right? And this may follow up, if the change is relevant to what I observe, and the consumption or provision may actually also lead to change. Yes, education, massive ways of communication, changes in habits that can be addressed cognitively. This is a complicated discussion indeed. I would say that not only cognitively. So now we're just listing strategies, but we will come back to this, So part of it can be demystified cognitively, but not differently. Yes, please, Jorge Vicente, see if you want to
Yeah,
intervene.
thank you so much. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I think this is like a sales case. If you want to get something good for others, in this case, to take less sugar, you have to prove the benefit, the profit they have with eating less sugar. No,
Mhm.
first of all, you have to prove that this attribute you have will be better for the health. So the way they
Okay.
know that this is much better, okay, I stop.
No, thank you. It's definitely, it's good, and it can start with information, and then you can always try to experiment with people, right? And saying, we have this group of people that haven't ate sugar for 1 month. How do they feel? I'm not sure if it's enough, right? So just to prove this, but of course, if you track people longitudinally, that could also be evidence. So looking into what can be good or what can be bad. And there were also examples here on, trying to rechange tastes and things like that. So clearly, if you're able to be more convincing, moving beyond information, then yes, higher chances of success. And indeed, besides limiting access, what we have also is this idea of taxation, right? Either positive or negative, right? So you either have higher taxes, which is something that is happening. We're going to see an example immediately on many places, right? So basically, again, an economic approach. Or you have some type of subsidies maybe for alternative products, that maybe are more expensive but have less sugar. So thank you for these contributions. I think that we have covered quite clearly and in details in many cases what we are considering to be traditional strategies, right? And clearly we are going superficial a bit through them, but this is the essence that you've mentioned, right? So carrots versus sticks, these are restrictions, these are the sticks, restrictions, and the carrots are incentives. So you try to shift people's behavior, either giving them something, or taking something from them, either in terms of prices or taxation. This is probably the most preferred approach in economics, because it means that we react to incentives. Now, we do not know for sure how fast is this reaction. So if you've discussed microeconomics and the concept of elasticity, how fast I'm changing my behavior. Yeah, so, this sweetened drink is a bit more expensive, but I already have a taste for sweet drinks. So I'm not sure if tomorrow exactly I'm going to give this up, right? So maybe it's going to take some time, or maybe I'm going to give up other things, right? So I'm not really sure if this reaction is as immediate and as constant as I would say. Of course, the way we apply this means that we can address either the final recipient, which is the consumer, which in many cases is not really working, yeah, or we can address indeed industries. We discuss less here in terms of behavior change about industries because these are structural changes that we need to do. And yeah, some things, and this is a discussion especially with the evidence that we have from the US, of course, that we can shift some behaviors in terms of obesity, eating, and sugar, some percentages up and down. But if the subsidies go for processed food, then of course that we're not going to be able to do miracles. So clearly, yeah, there is this need of a political will to change industries. So we're not going to address this, but this is definitely realistic. So this is one part of the strategies: incentives, taxes, and using limits. Limits of the law, for instance, in terms of access. The other two strategies are softer. Right, you can try to convince people, right? So you're saying if you manage to show them the benefits, then you are halfway. Yeah, this is in general what we see in marketing. If I able to sell your product because you believe you're going to be, healthier, beautiful, smarter, then I can do this, right? But of course, that yes, with selling things that are involving a certain level of restrictions from our side, not eating sugar, then the persuasion needs to be stronger. So it is important to actually indeed use either more convincing information or role models, or indeed specific training and education that would go beyond this superficial level, So I don't really just need to be convinced on this time, but to internalize that in general, sugar is not great for my health. And this, if I start learning this from kindergarten, is going to work out in adult life. Yeah. So this is the common tool that we have. Now, next to this, and I'm not here to solve the problem of sugar consumption. So each of them has their role, and in various studies, and as I said, I'm going to show you one, each of them managed to reach some effects. But beyond this, what this behavioral economics or behavioral insight tool is bringing forward is this idea of a fourth category of interventions that are very, simply called nudges, which are this type of gentle pushes that said, I would like to push you in a different direction, but not in a heavy way. So that it doesn't become something that is aggressive or violent. I do not want to take out of your options, to limit your options, but I would like you to be sure that, I put you in that direction. And of course, that this is an approach that it's called paternalistic in many cases because it comes from what we see between parents and kids, so we like that our kids make the right decisions. Yes, when they're small, we tell them, like the government would tell us, do not eat that much sugar. So you tell your kids, not do this. Then maybe you try to ban them. You're not allowed to go there or to eat this. But then you see that at the end, they are free to do what they want. Yes, you try to empower them with information, but in some situation, maybe it's good to go with this people out. Maybe it's good to go to this show. So you are free to do where you want, but I'm facilitating things for you to go into that direction. The first information that I put in front of you is this, like what's there, but I'm not sure you can see it very well with Homer Simpson, is that, you have the fruits and you have the cookies, but I'm putting the fruits first and the cooking second, right? So usually people tend to say that this is a too subtle approach, because they're saying, if I want to eat sugar, I'm going to eat it no matter what, so it doesn't matter if it's up there or if it's down there. But this comes from the assumption that I really know what are my preferences in all cases, which reality tells us that it's not always the case. When you think what I would like to have today, maybe for dessert. So maybe you think I want something sweet, but you do not know exactly that you want something that has 80% sugar or that much sweet, or maybe not every day. You just want something that makes you feel good, that is a bit, it looks good and so on, which means that your preference is not so stable. It's a bit weak. So it may depend what you see first when you stand in a queue. It may depend how this is presented, or if it's easier, to buy this and something else, So to that extent, this idea of nudging people means that what we're trying to do is to understand a bit better how some of these decisions that, they lead to not so great results in the end, are not actually the result of a rational choice process, are the result of habits, are the result of what people around us are doing, are the result of the fact that I don't have time to process all the information, so I'm just going to choose this, right? If this is not the result of a super rational process of analysis, then it means that if I'm able to intervene in the process, it can change the result, because there is room to do this. Of course, we are not saying that this works exactly the same for everyone or for all types of decisions, right? For food consumption, yes, maybe there is a part of the population that is very specific on their habits. But usually, statistically, you're not going to find more than 10, 20, 25% that are super rigid. So this leaves you with 60, 70, 80% of the people that are malleable, right? All of us, we have areas in which we have clearer preferences. I would only do this way, and I know that is good. But a lot of them fall into this category in which we are easily swayed. And the idea of nudges in its original form is to actually sway us in the good direction. Yes. This, I was telling you that I have some results just to close the loop on the sugar consumption. I have some results from a study, I think it was done in, Germany in 2008. So basically, we have this type of different interventions, and to what extent they generated a reaction in the behavior from low reaction, where you have 1, to high reaction, where you have 7, right? So informing people through this type of sugar label seems to work in a quite good way. Yes, the paper is on the next slide. So the sugar label is good. Public health campaigns are good. You know exactly what you are saying. Reducing availability, it's not that great, because, people may say, but you are messing a bit with my freedom. But nonetheless, if you don't have it, there is some change in behavior. Completely banning, so not allowing advertising on sugar products, it doesn't work that well. Then we see, yes, a bit more complicated. Technically, to have less sugar in products, so it has mixed results, some good, but also some resistance. Reducing portion size, also mixed and with higher rigidity. Sugar tax, because, you know, as consumers, we tend to react heavily on taxes, right? So we do not like them. So this means that, yes, the behavior is actually, resistant to this. And also something that in this particular sample didn't work, the substitution by artificial sweeteners. So it's a complex area. We do see, you know, the role of information, and we do see some rigidity in others. And I mean, the relevance of this is that when we want to apply nudges into some area, we would like to previously understand how people reacted to existing interventions, right? So that we do not start from scratch and we say we're going to do some magic. We want to see indeed what is their reaction here, and what happening, what was actually happening. Yeah, so this is indeed a paper that concludes that people react better to least intrusive intervention, and they are resistant to more restrictive intervention. Something that it is interesting for what we want to observe in terms of behavior on the longer period of time, is this idea that if you manage to actually push for an intervention, then the acceptance will actually increase in time. Now, this is complicated to do if you have a negative resistance in the beginning, but it is also something to account for, that the way we should expect impact is not, you know, tomorrow or in a week or in a month. And if indeed we have evidence that, you know, sugar in kindergarten is really bad for, you know, oral health or things like that, maybe indeed you want to have a restrictive policy there, because acceptance would actually happen at some point. Yes, the caveat is that strong opposition may generate into side effects, like here when you have higher taxes, you just go and you buy stuff from the neighbors, right? So do we have a question or? Okay, yeah, if there is something, please let me know and I will stop. Okay, so this means that in all cases, what we want to do is to be sure that we are understanding the population that we are addressing, that we have a concrete case, and then that we are able to integrate more traditional interventions with this type of newer type intervention that we are discussing, so that we move efficiently on this ground. Now, accepting that, you know, that there is room for nudges in this area of interventions, right? It is more as a reflection or as a you know, rhetorical question, if at some point we or you have actually nudged somebody without having this theory in mind, you know, which if I would reframe it, would mean that to what extent we try to influence other people's behavior without going through this type of formal, you know, intervention. And basically, if we think about this type of, yes, nudging is, you know, persuading, but it doesn't necessarily mean, and I will put immediately the definition, it doesn't necessarily mean a certain type of cognitive persuasion, so when we say, I've tried to convince you to do things this way, and we are talking through. So this is one approach, and it really depends what is the discussion and how you can talk. But nudges can also mean that, I, instead of discussing with you that you should go and have a medical checkup, I just left on your office, some letters or some ads about this new clinic, about the benefit of checkups and so on. It is also a nudge, because I'm putting information in a different way, right? For instance, but yes, so persuading, influencing, these are, instances of nudges. If we look into the definition, because I agree that it's not always clear on, what is this, the small push, is basically we put here any type of action that is persuasion in any form, if you want, that would steer people in a certain direction without limiting their access, without restricting them to go in a different direction. It's basically, I am opening a door for them because it's easier like that, but there are other doors that remain open. So this is this idea of liberty preserving. But I'm trying to make that door that I believe it is more relevant, of more motivation, less procrastination, better eating, and so on, to make it, easier to process, easier to understand in different ways, So this is nudging, steering them into that direction, but leaving the other options possible. Right? So any attempt at influencing people's judgment, choice, or behavior in a predictable way. And when we say in a predictable way, it means that what we're going to put here as nudges are various types of examples that address a certain bias that we have, right? For instance, it is well documented that people do not understand really well probabilities, right? So when I try to convince them that it is actually good for them to buy insurance, right? And I tell them, there is a 10% chance that, something bad will happen with your house, for instance. This is documented. So they don't really get the 10%. But if I'm explaining this differently, instead of a percentage, I'm putting them this in a more frequentist manner. So I say 1 of 100 people, if it's 10%, sorry, 10 of 100 people will have this problem at you in this area, right? This makes it more salient for them, right? So it's a nudge that it has still information, but it is a clearer information considering that we know we have a bias with probability. Another nudge could simply be, not addressing information, right? But yeah, as it is here encouraging someone to do something in a positive way, I'm saying, I've made you an appointment, or, your employer made you an appointment just to discuss with, these people because it's relevant and this is encouraging. Or more emotionally, I just read in the newspaper that something bad happened in this area with houses, accidents and so on. And people usually take insurance up, So if I take this as an information that is emotional, this just happens, it works much better than the probability. So the area of how I can do the steering, this persuasion, this attempt of influencing is quite large. It means that if I want to do this in a scientific way, I need to understand what issue I'm addressing in people's mind when they decide, so why should I go with the nudge? Because I see that people aren't making rational decisions because of this. So then this is justified. If this is not happening, if I do not understand that there is a bias there, and I'm just trying to influence people with no reasoning, then of course that it is quite well pointed by many people that this can easily go into trying to manipulate people. So if there is a case in which people would benefit from more information, but I'm not offering them, and I'm just saying, well, I'm just trying to nudge you into this direction, then this is not an ethical use of the concept, right? So this is the blurry part, but the scientific action remains where I understand that there are biases and where I see that I can actually work with some type of action to introduce them. So this is something that is quite discussed in the literature, right? There are people that are saying, how you can convince or persuade very easily by a better, representation of information. Hence, this debate that you see here, that not all good design is a nudge. Yes, some things are better designed than the others, but nonetheless, there are various examples through which, good design can stand as a nudge because it addresses a decision in which, you do not have time to think, you do not have all the information. And if, just somebody points out that on this side of the subway, you're walking, on this side or you're standing, yeah, it's good design and a good nudge in the same case because, we observe if this is actually changing people's behavior. So there are, various perspective here. One belongs to the guy that received the Nobel Prize for this entire conceptualization of nudges, which is Richard Thaler. So he got the prize in 2017 for both proposing the idea of a nudge and for implementing it. And the way he defines it, it says that, we accept that a nudge will be something that is going to affect us if we consider as humans, but not pure rational agents, these econs, that are always in control of information process and information, right? So basically, this is one hypothesis of economics, that economic agents are always able to maximize things, that they always know what to do, and that they will be able to always obtain the optimal decision, in a mathematical form. But the reality, outside of the economic textbooks shows us that things are not in this way. And basically, what we are trying to do is to find better categories, just to understand, where we can actually be swayed in the wrong direction, in the good direction, right? So from this perspective, Thaler says, we can always say that a well-designed traffic light is actually a nudge, and some people will tend to say, well, this is the clearest rule that we have in traffic. You should stop at red light. Yeah, so it's not that we don't get it. It's not that we don't have the information. If you have eyesight, right, you see it. But nonetheless, when we look at the statistics from various cities and from traffic in general, we do see that a lot of people do not stop at traffic lights, right? And then, the question is, how do we interpret the statistics? People are bad intended, they are stupid, they don't understand red, or maybe the red is not well enough signaled, right? Maybe it should be bigger, maybe you shouldn't have trees on them, right? Maybe it should be a bit more different than staying, strictly the information, right? You should emphasize it, and then people may change their particular behavior. So clearly, it's just one example, and of course, we can always consider specific information, but the logic is this one, to try to reconsider the explanation that we provide for bad outcomes. One very common explanation that we tend to take is people are not rational. People do not want to do the right thing, right? If we switch this and we say, yes, we want to do the right thing, but we don't know exactly how in this amount of informations and decision that we take every day, then we may find more relevance into the idea of nudge. Okay, now tell me, I should have asked this from the beginning. Should we go for a break? Is this customary in the lecture, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes break? I don't know if Ambar or Hector are here.
No problem for me.
Okay, I think it's a good idea, like 10 minutes.
Okay, so it's 7 minutes to 7. So should we go back at a bit more, 5 after 7? 5 minutes after 7 is fine. Break until then. So we have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I will write it, and if you can also say it, then it's fine. Okay, so small break. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay. ¿Se va a pasar la asistencia?
Acerca de la asistencia, me comentan que será al final.
Muchas gracias.
Amigos, amigas, estamos pues en el curso conductual con la profesora Rodica Yanole Kalin. El seminario tiene ya algunos años de desarrollo. Estamos que la lengua que se emplea mayormente es el inglés, también lenguas romances. Muchos colegas han empleado el portugués, francés, italiano. Así que estamos atentos a la experiencia que comparte la profesora Yanole Kalin. Que es su segunda experiencia con la universidad, proyecto que pueda visitar Lima, Perú este año. según su disponibilidad horaria. Yes, Rodica, we have time. We have time to develop for the question, the comments, the public. Yes. Amigos y amigas, destacamos que este mes de enero, Perú como Rumanía, un periodo de actividades académicas que permiten a Rodica compartir su experiencia. Destaco, subrayo su disponibilidad, ¿no? Expresándole un gran saludo desde la universidad y un gran aprecio desde nuestra casa de estudios. Rodica, ya eres sanmarquina. En Lima estamos pleno verano, en Bucarest en este momento tenemos 4 grados centígrados, están en invierno. Son las 7 de la noche en Bucarest. De Lima a Madrid, la distancia en vuelo de avión son 12 horas y de Madrid a Bucarest son casi 4 horas. El pasado mes de agosto, Claudia, destacada alumna de la Escuela de Negocios Internacionales, ganó una beca para desarrollar una escuela de verano, Summer School, en la Universidad de Bucarest. orientada a su área académica. Estuvo en Bucarest el mes de agosto.
Okay, so I'm back. Thank you. Good. Yeah, so thank you, Ambar, again for clearing the break. Yeah, so I'm on a different time. I knew that, but I forgot. So moving a bit on with this part that I think is quite clear that it's unclear, so to speak, right? So nudges are less ambiguous nowadays, but there is still room to to discuss around them. And of course, that this moves a bit beyond one single presentation. We need to look at how they have been applied in reality, and then also at this type of papers that stay longer on them, and they try to conceptualize them. So because of course we are processing information fastly and not always very in depth, they seem to be a bit sketchy, but once we understand how they've been applied, it becomes clearer that while it is and somebody was saying here that one of the most important attributes of them is that they still provide freedom of choice. Yeah, so this by contrary to other options, right? So it is steering in a direction. In what direction one should be steered, this is also something that needs attention, because if this is done by a public authority, then I need to have evidence enough that that direction is one that is going to generate good things for the individual, right? That is for their well-being. So if I want to make people eat less sugar, I need to be sure, looking at correct evidence from medical science, from biology, from chemistry, that the consumption of sugar is related with some type of disease, pathology, bad things happening in life. If not, I have an issue. The same is happening with many things. If I want to convince people to save more, I want to understand a bit what is the negative side of not saving and so on. At the end of the day, they will choose, but I need to be sure that I'm pushing them in the right direction. Right? The way I'm doing this is the second property, this idea of trying to look at this type of cognitive shortcomings that we have when we choose. This is also something that is not always easy to take in by us, because people in behavioral science call this the idea that we have bounded rationality, so that we are limited. Racionalidad limitada. Clearly, we do not want to say that we are limited. We would like to say that we are the best of the best and so on. And we are giving our biological constraints. Yeah, so of course that, and this is even more obvious today with artificial intelligence. Yes, we can do up to a point, but there are, shortcomings that we cannot address, at least in terms of managing huge amounts of information. Right? So looking at this, we want to see where we fail, because we do not fail at everything. So we do not need to be nudged for everything, right? For some cases, it's a simple, education intervention. For others, it may be more complicated. So understanding the direction, understanding these shortcomings is important, right? Understanding the fact that we want to use them, as I was mentioning, in those areas in which people do not have specific preferences, right? And again, this is not always easy to convince people that we do not know what we want. But there is plenty of evidence that we explain a lot of our decisions and behaviors after we took them, but it doesn't mean that this was the initial motivator, right? So we buy a new car and then we find justification for, what is the utility, how good it is for the environment and so on. And in many cases, it can just be, what we call the influence of the neighbors, that everyone has a new car and then we decide to go for it. So it is also very hard to see this in practice for ourselves. But when we look at studies, we do see this. Clearer, right? And so that we keep freedom, we have to have this exit possibility. So I may be convinced to eat less sugar, to save more, but if I don't want it, I try it. Somebody was saying, I don't see the benefits, I can go back. So this is also something that needs to be available by design, so that we operate under an ethical framework. Yes. So just to go into some example. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for this question, and I will go immediately. This is. I mean, it's one part of it, that information and training wouldn't have much effect. They have effect. I would say they don't have as much as we would like to, as much as expected. And in many cases, this is the idea, that maybe I'm expecting a 50% effect and their effect is just 20%. How do I push through them? Through different tools. it doesn't mean that they don't have effect in all cases, right? Just that there are cases in which they're not working that well by themselves, right? And it's the same, I would say, for regulations. Yes, and I go back to paternalistic approaches. Having rules is good. We see this in the way we raise the kids. So there is need for some regulation. Having only rules and no training on how to do things is bad. Having both rules and training, in some cases, for some behaviors is effective, but for softer behaviors, motivation, determination, grit, things like that is not necessarily enough. So just to answer this comment, I would say that it's not black and white. It is more, what is the combination that we should do between education, regulation, nudges, and something else, and to accept that in some cases, yes, maybe information is, or education is on the second place. This probably is harder to grasp, but not without testing and not in all cases. So going back to this example, there's a lot of work on how to make people pay their taxes. Hence, because governments want that. And when I say a lot of work, it means that, we do have rules in place. We do have sanctions. So there is regulations. We have negative incentives, that there are some fines happening there. But nonetheless, tax evasion is high in many areas of the world, some of them, strikingly high, some not that much. So basically what you see here are various messages that are communicated. So to emphasize maybe, certain areas, certain parts of the process of taxes and consequences that could get people to change more their behavior. So for instance, the first one, if the taxpayers did not contribute their share, our commune with that many inhabitants would suffer greatly. With your taxes, you help this community, this country, fictive Trinbach, attractive for its inhabitants. So basically, what's the link here? Of course, that in all cases, people tend to know this. But in reality, there is not always a clear link between how taxes are actually funding other important things. And of course, the main criticism is that, the government is not doing a good job with our taxes. Of course, this is correct. But even if they're not efficient, for instance, the example that I give to my students is about having free education. Right? So I say, okay, up to a point, I didn't understood that, there is a certain luxury that I can go to school, that I have access to education, and this couldn't happen if at least some people would pay the taxes. Okay, I understand that if the government would do a better job, or if more people would pay their taxes, schools will be nicer, teachers would be more motivated because they have, more time or more pay and so on. That's a different discussion. But basically what the first message it does is to link this. Now, if you do this, this is for the good, not of the state, but, of the community. So this is something that goes into this direction of what I want to emphasize a bit more, right? And you see that is very similar to the second one. All of them have generated some good effects, right? But the second one is a bit more general, right? So it says, what I'm going to fund: education, health, and other important sectors of society. So this is also a discussion on how specific I want to be, So if I say, I pay this tax and then I can have another hospital in my area, if I can make it, clearer on my level, then it's going to be more convincing. For instance, if it's a regional approach. If I just say I can make health sector better, then it is farther away. Then what you see on the third one, it's something that maybe you have heard, and we're going to look at it a bit separately. It's something, again, that some messages were saying here about the power of social norms. How do I convince people to do this thing that it's not comfortable, and maybe I don't believe it in, by showing their benefits. So this was the first idea. The third one says by showing them that this is an acceptable and desirable behavior in the society. Other people are doing this. This is something that has been tested a lot in the UK, right? So the best message here was 9 out of 10 people did their taxes on time. You are in the small minority of those who haven't paid, right? And this has increased the threshold by significant percentages. And then the last one, which is also informational, I think this is from Argentina, Argentinian dollar. This says, that there are some negative consequences, but here it says exactly what they're going to be, because this is also something that we see from reality. People expect a fine, but they don't know how big it is. And of course, in some cases, there is again the discussion of if the amount of the fine is relevant and if it's going to be enforced, right? But for some people that are, well-intended, the discussion relies on the fact that indeed the information is much more punctual, is clearer, and this could work. Yes, thank you for this question on social nudging. And indeed, the question, the discussion of where we can use this social pressure is important, and it can backfire. First, you really want to be sure when you say, that 90%, 9 out of 10 paid their taxes on time, you want to be sure that this is happening. If you do not have correct data on this, then of course it's both unethical and people will not believe it. If it's true and they do not believe it, then you need to be sure that you are actually showing this correctly. Yes, of course, that if this idea of creating negative responses actually appears, not for instance with taxation, but it appears with research on undeclared work, for instance, right? So people are saying there are so many of my neighbors, of my colleagues that, for instance, do consulting, do freelancing, and they do not declare work. So when you hear this on the news, indeed, it may accentuate your fact that, okay, I'm actually doing the right thing, so many people are not doing it, and this is fine. If you hear the positive and it is very contrasting for your reality, then it means, I would say, that the design is not really accurate enough. Because if I say 9 out of 10 people in the country, and you feel that, you want to be very different because of this fairness, maybe it's more important to have a statistic about what is happening at the city level, at the neighborhood level, at the community level, so that you are closer to those people, and then indeed that you can address this potential of negative reaction. So it is quite clear that we cannot simply adapt everything that worked in other areas, right? So I was telling you that this worked very well in the UK. So it's a completely different culture than in many countries, and they don't have the same distrust cultures that we see in other areas. This doesn't mean that social conformity doesn't work, but it doesn't work necessarily at this level. So this we will address when we're going to look at a clearer methodology of behavior change, right? So now we're just looking at examples, and examples are how we say, okay, can I apply this? Would it work? Would it not work? But basically, in order to decide if we want to apply it, we need to have what we called a clearer diagnostics, right? So further comment, when the diagnostic is that you have low level of trust in institution, indeed, there is a discussion that, you know, if you want more injunctive norms, yeah, what would be acceptable from, you know, other perspectives and not what other people are doing, because that could be more general. So I'm not sure if there is exact evidence of this, but there is an inclination, yes, to go more with injunctive norms, what you should do, than descriptive norms. But what you should do is also complicated. So if you are able to do injunctive norms on what is maybe morally correct to do, then you are better. If you're doing injunctive norms also based on what the state tells you to do or any other institution, then it is so-so. But the logic is there. So we're going to tackle this a bit in the in the next session. We're going to do social norms a bit more clearer. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this. So yeah, this is just one example of, you know, how to look at this interventions and find a bit of inspiration, but not to completely adapt them without actually asking these type of questions that we need to do beforehand. Yeah, so we're just looking now at the endpoints, some attractive techniques that we could use, but we're also going to look at the process so that we choose among these techniques the one that are more realistic. Yeah, so this is the logic. Just one more segment here on why we need nudges. And the analogy that builds this is from what can be, you know, a physical shortcoming. Maybe I broke my leg and I cannot walk, you know. And if I have a physical deficiency, I can use either of these two approaches to actually walk. Yeah, I can use some tools to help me walk, you know, a chair, people, yeah, instruments. And this is having some type of extra help, versus what you are saying also in the first part, I can change a bit part of my behavior for of my environment from the period in which I'm unable to walk, you know. So I can have online classes, I can move my classes on the ground floor and so on. Basically, this is the same when we discuss about cognitive shortcomings. I see that I cannot process well certain information, that is too much, that I don't have time, that I don't understand it. What do? I have some tools to support my decisions, right? So computers, lists, you know, artificial intelligence, yeah, everything that externalizes. But I can also change part of the behavior so that it is easier for me to do certain actions, right? The way the information is presented, you know, the order of the information, and various things that we will do. So what's important here is that these two things are not exclusive. So I can apply, I can make appeal to these tools that are usually, you know, helping me to deal with information, but I can also work towards changing the environment because it's going to be more efficient, right? So when I consider this, of course, that the next step is to understand what are those, you know, issues, cognitive shortcomings that we are discussing that much. What are these type of biases, right? So usually we say that something goes into the category of a bias, not only and not when we make a mistake simply, you know, so I didn't look at this probability, I didn't put this into account, and it is just a simple mistake, you know, that happened once, but then, you know, I figure it out and I'm not going to do it, or it just happens for some people. But I'm looking at the same mistake that we see over and over again in various contexts across various populations. What we look at an error, a mistake, that it is systematic. It's not simply noise. Yes, with noise, we know that some mistakes are above average, some mistakes are below, we expect them to clear out, and then we go back to our rational model. With biases, we see that systematically every time we see a cluster of errors somewhere, and that cluster appears to be consistent, across many populations. That's why we have this type of studies that have confirmed the effect not for one sample, but for various samples. Yes, there could be differences of magnitude, of order, and so on, but the bias statistically is there. And not only in one particular context, right, but we tend to do this on various contexts. So the question that we are trying to address through these nudges is how to deal with these biases, and simplistically, how to make them go away. And again, I will apply an analogy to understand it a bit better. So the bias in this case is a problem that we have. We have a door that should shut down by itself. It has a stopper on the top, right? And that should keep the door shut down every time, somebody enters. And that stopper is not working anymore, right? That is our bias. What can we do to fix the problem? Yes, technically, the first solution that tends to come to people's mind is, well, you try to fix the stopper, right? You try to fix the problem there mechanically, you or by asking someone else, and then you solve the issue. That's one possibility. Let's say that you don't have the technical knowledge, or that particular piece cannot be fixed. It is of a certain construction that you cannot redo it. You cannot make it work. But you still want to solve the issue, which means that you let the problem there, you let the bias there, but you find some other way, some other mechanism to shut the door. Yes? Some other things to push it or to keep it closed, and so on. These are basically the two approaches that we see when dealing with biases. Yes, the first one, this idea of fixing the mechanism, clean it, replace it, make it sure that it works, is what we call a de-biasing mechanism. It means that I understand why it's not working. I understand why I'm unable to process probabilities. I understand why, I can make stereotypical decision. I understand why I'm emotional on some things. And then if I understand this, I clean it, and I'm not going to do it again. So this is de-biasing. Now, I don't see, but when I discuss this with my students, they tend to say, okay, well, complicated, because sometimes I do understand why I was wrong in a case, but not every time. But it doesn't last, or it's impossible not to do it again. Yes. And they also ask me, because you're teaching about biases, you are not prone to them? And of course, it's a great question, because we are all prone to them. Many of them have, this type of evolutionary bias. We like sweet things. So it's not that if I know that it's bad for me, I'm not going to want it. I can deal a bit better with this, but it's not going to go away. We are designed in certain ways that, we get easily triggered by some type of information, and maybe we're going to do the same mistake 1,000 times, and maybe we're going to be able to recognize it, but not necessarily to de-bias it completely. So many of the issues we can understand, but it doesn't mean that we're going to fix it sometimes at all. Sometimes we fix it temporarily, right? So, which leaves us that in many cases, what we're going to apply is the second solution, that it is called a re-biasing mechanism. So we still have the bias. This is our biological construction. We are still prone to, not be careful, not to process information and so on. But we introduce something else out there or in there that helps us deal with this, behavior or decision. Yeah, so the joke with how to actually do some work, you unplug your internet, you shut down your internet, because if not, you are tempted to do something else. This means that your bias is there, but you've activated some type of mechanism that tells you, okay, yes, now you can focus. It's not always the most efficient because you have the feeling that you didn't solve the problem, but it is realistic that in some cases this is the most that we can do. And then, of course, this is also something that needs to be considered with respect to our own persona. How do we deal with this? How much I de-bias, how much I re-bias, but also very differently when I think about how do I deal with some groups. Yes. How do I deal with my students? I am able to de-bias their issues, or in some cases, by the way I build my class or by the way I discuss with them, I'm actually doing more re-biasing, because that is the most that I could do. At some point, someone was saying here in the comments if a certain type of cognitive therapy, could fit into this idea of changing behaviors. And of course that it does fit, under the logic of how you can understand your issues and change your behavior. It could be, de-biasing, understanding, what's wrong in your decision and change it. But it's not the focus of our work, because therapy is something that takes a longer period of time. It is an individual process, and we cannot scale it up, so we cannot apply it to big group of people. It's very expensive and very specific. But it is, in this language, what we would call a de-biasing logic. I understand what is happening and I'm change my behavior based on that. It is nonetheless one that requires a lot of investment, and that's why, what we're trying to do here is to find interventions that are easier to apply into a larger scale. Now, just to give you an example of de-biasing, at least on the short period of time, one important bias that we all have is this idea of being too confident in our beliefs. Right? Is this idea that I am, better than everyone or better than the average, and I know a bit better. Not in this words, but I'm more confident that I know what to do. So this means that, in many cases, when we are too confident, we do not estimate correctly the time that it will take to do some things, the costs involved. This is very often for project managers, right? So they say, I have this estimation, but I know that in practice, statistically, some things I didn't put correct, so I just top up 20%, so the correct amount is this, even if my estimation is lower. So this is one way to look at it. How I can become more realistic, how I can deal with this overconfidence bias, you have this example here, in which instead of just thinking of the many reasons for which I'm wrong, I've read about this, I'm a professor, I've studied, I know how things work, I think on the contrary, I think, okay, what would be some reasons for why my argument is flawed, for why my estimation would not work, and to consistently try to identify things that would bring my estimation down. What would make this not happen? So this doesn't, and usually people make these adjustments, right? When you put them to consistently find negative evidence or evidence against them, they tend to reduce this overconfidence. So it is what we call a debiasing example because, I become a bit more realistic, but it is a debias that works on a short period of time. It doesn't mean that is going to stay with me forever and ever. Maybe, I take this approach and I say, okay, I want to apply it to other things because by design, we will be over optimistic in estimating probabilities of success for many things, so then the bias is still there, but I'm more aware that I need to apply this on a common basis. This is, for instance, what companies call the type of a pre-mortem approach, right? Or I do it with my students that they just start the masters, and I'm saying, okay, you are very enthusiastic now, you are very motivated to do a lot of things, but consider, that in 2 years, this is how the master takes, not all of you will actually be getting the degree. So think from the end to the beginning, not what would keep you on track, but what would, make you give up the program or not being able to finish it, right? And it's quite hard, especially when you are at the start of the project and you are really convinced that, you're going to be able to deal with everything. And the logic here is not to discourage people. It's just to say, okay, what can I do, to deal with this? Many of them, they're saying, yes, probably there are going to be many issues regarding time because they are working. So then the logic of overconfidence is to say, it's not that you are 100% sure that you're going to finish because you are smart. Maybe the probability for you to finish is 80% because, you have to live and you have to work. So then what can you do with your current job so that you manage this? Can you take time off? Can you find people to help you? How can you manage your time better and how you can think about this in time? Yeah. So this is the idea of debiasing for a moment and then correctly managing this. The other solution that we called rebiasing means that we simply adopt a solution that is going to deal with the problem without solving it. So, for instance, this is something that exists in reality. It's a program in American companies that's called the Save More Tomorrow plan, because a big issue is that American employees do not have savings, especially for retirements. And even if they gain more money, they do not necessarily save more. So this program, what they do is that they provide an automatic enrollment. So by default, they are enrolled in a saving plan. They can get out if they do not want it, but they are in by default, and we're going to see this as a very powerful nudge. And then once they are in, if their wage increases, automatically the saving rate will also increase. So basically what the program does is that it takes this decision strain from them, because what we observe in practice is that they tend to postpone this because it's complicated, So most people say, I would like to save, but then there are so many temptations on which I can spend my money, and then I don't know exactly how much should I save and so on. So the program does this for them, but allows them also to say, if you don't want to do it, you can always back up. But people don't actually back up because it's the same thing. In order to take you out of the program, you should need to consider if I'm doing the good thing. And they, again, either postpone or not make a decision. So what they've seen when they've analyzed this is that people, this is the third column, right? The participants who joined the SMART plan, they started with a saving rate of 3.5, and they've reached 13.6 in terms of saving because they have various raises in their wage, right? And this is the biggest saving rate that they obtained in this program, in which some people didn't do anything. They didn't discuss with a financial consultant, or they discussed with a financial consultant. So there is relevancy of talking with somebody, so they still save a bit more, versus some people that simply said, I don't want this plan, I can do it by myself. So in all cases, we see that these percentages are smaller for savings by comparison to those that took this automatic enrollment and automatic increase. Yeah. So we see that it is efficient. Why do we say it is rebiasing? We say that is rebiasing because it doesn't mean that necessarily those people here are really better at understanding, and acknowledging that you need to save because, you're going to need it, that they, have a better understanding of the of money, of financial management and things like this. No, they just simply went with a program that increased this on average in relation to their account, without them being, let's say, smarter financially. Yeah. So this is a downsize, because maybe, they're not that good in other areas, but the good outcome is that they will have more saved money. Yes. So rebiasing says you stay with your problems, you still have temptations and on, but you understand them and you just stay in an intervention or in a design or in a setting that helps you deal with this. And in many cases, this is done by the fact that I accept this type of, automatic decisions or uniform decisions without going every time through them. Yes. For some people that could be, very discouraging because it's so then we are more easily controlled. And of course that it's always good to have an understanding, of why saving is good, of why it is important to manage your assets and so on. So we do not deny this. But if we just stay on this pure understanding, you see that the percentages are at half. So saving 6% versus saving 13.6%. This is huge in terms of what we expect to be benefits for these people, especially in this case where they do not have other type of pensions. So these are just two examples, and I know that probably there is a lot of information to take in for now. So just to tap up a bit the information, I will tell you that that if we think about the number of biases that we can address, this number is huge. There is this cognitive bias codex here, that explains a lot of them. So I will put also the link. So it's a huge registry of biases, and they are split by these four inclination that our brain has. This need to act fast. It doesn't mean that we don't know things, but yes, when we are in a hurry, and which this is in so many cases, yes, we go through shortcuts, right? So we're going to discuss about these shortcuts. So this is one category of biases generated by this time constraint, speed constraint. The other that I've mentioned is because there is just too much information that we would need to compare. And then again, we apply some shortcut, right? Instead of comparing all attributes, I'm just looking at one, or I'm looking at what other people. In some cases, there is what we call not enough meaning. So things are ambiguous. We don't know where to put them. I was saying probabilities, but then various other descriptions. So then in this case, we're going to see many biases that are simply in the area of not acting or keeping the status quo, right? So I do not want to change because I don't understand. And then there is a lot of there are a lot of errors also because, of course, our memory is not the memory of a computer, right? We remember some things, but not always very accurately. We justify other things. Memory also, dissolves in time because it makes room for other things. So then again, a lot of mistakes come from here. So this is not to, this picture is not to to overwhelm you, but to understand that there is a systematic way in which they are split, and I can address some categories without the need of learning them by heart. I just consult things, and I see that in some areas one are more prevalent than the others, and so on. And with this, of course, that we're also going to find evidence that not all biases or not all shortcuts, so to speak, are always wrong. And this is something that you're going to find in this area that's called heuristics and biases, right? So these heuristics are the faster approaches, the shortcuts that we are taking. And there is an influent psychologist in behavioral economics that says, well, in many cases, the fact that we do not have time to do cost benefits analysis and model and so on, it means that I've just adapted to the environment and I'm smart enough that I'm able to do this. And this is fine, So this is one direction that says, it's a way of adaptation. And he gives this name of ecological rationality. I adapt to the environment. Yeah, there's much more information, then I should act differently. And I've put here one of his papers that says, you can find adaptations, heuristics on everything, so how you catch a ball. Do you calculate, do you compute the angle, the speed, the whatever, or you just look at the ball and you try to catch it, So that's a simple example, but this is what we do, with various approximations. So this is one perspective. And you're going to find some examples here. The other perspective is one that has been promoted a bit more in behavioral economics, and maybe you know the name, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. They received the first Nobel Prize in behavioral economics for this. And basically, they understand this simplifying heuristics as approaches that could generate some type of errors, right? And they are trying to minimize this errors here. What they are saying is that, of course, this is not an approach that aims to denigrate human intelligence. It's just as we look at diseases so that we know how to be healthy, we need to look at this type of errors so that we know what should improve, right? And it is important to point out that these, for instance, even if there's a huge number of biases, some of them are more prevalent than others, and yeah, these three you're going to find in so many places: anchoring, availability, and representativeness. Yeah. Okay. Good. So I will stop the discussion here. I will leave this part that is aimed for indeed the discussion, maybe, as a reflection exercise, what type of biases can you identify in your decision from the last period. And, if you've seen, I do things in a certain way. I meet new people and immediately I form an impression among them, right? For instance, it's common, right? So, and sometimes, maybe I just see bad outcomes. I see, okay, my first impression was this, but in 2 days I change it. So then I observe that, there is something there. So what should I do so that I'm not that very triggered, just as an example. So the idea is not to necessarily go that much into theory, but just to understand in what type of decision and to what extent we are able to see these biases by ourselves. You know, sometimes it's easier if you think about your friends, you know, so it's an alternative exercise. Have you seen biases in them? You know, when we say she or he is always making that type of decision, you know, and I don't know how to convince them not to go every time in that direction because it's not good for them, you know. So this is just as an idea of how to go a bit through this complicated part of biases. And from this discussion next time, we will look specifically into some very well-known nudges that have worked. And then in the first session, I think we're going to look at methodologies, how to analyze things. And then we're going to do case studies. I will try to adapt. So if I've seen that there are many AI assistants here. So if you have also a copy of the chat, that would also be great if I could have it. I mean, the comments that we have here, because some of them were asking some questions and I would like to take a look through them. I don't know if I can save it by myself. I will try, but in case you save something and I can have a copy of the chat, that will be good, but I will try to also copy things. Yes, if you want to write me in the time, I will, you have, my email address is with Hector, so I will send the slides and you will have my email address also there. So if you have things to signal by next time, I will be happy to try to address them so that I also respond to some of your questions a bit better. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your participation in the middle of the day for you. It's evening for me. I'm really happy that I had this opportunity and yes, looking forward to the next session.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Rodica. I would like thank you also for the time your to share us your knowledge, and well, I think this is very meaningful for all of us. And well, also Professor Hector. Unfortunately, was unable to be present during the part of the season, but however, he truly appreciated the opportunity to stay here, to share all the knowledge. And well, he also wants you to know that you are also very welcome to visit Lima, and whenever you have a time or your schedule allow it. And so, yeah.
Okay, muchas gracias. I will let you know if I plan a visit, but definitely,
Yeah.
yes, it's on my list. Yes.
It will be
Thank
an
you so
honor
much for your.
Thank you so much, Cecilia.
Thank you so much for your time and your questions, and I will try to, leave a bit more time for interaction for next time. So have a great day and a great week. See you next Wednesday then. Yeah. Adios. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Hasta luego.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank
Everyone.
you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The next season is the next Wednesday. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for everyone. The next season is next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Until 1 p.m. So until next time, thank you very much.
De 8 a 1 dice, ¿no?